not shatter like glass or rip apart with thunderous finality. Instead, it resonated, a deep, humming frequency that vibrated through the soil, through the loops and ramps and palm trees that had stood for generations, through the very chaos energy that pulsed beneath the world like a heartbeat. Dr. Eggman's latest contraption, a towering spire of metal and arrogance called the Chaos Condenser, had been designed to do one thing: extract the latent chaos energy from the environment and focus it into a single controllable source. Sonic had dismantled 3 similar machines in the past month alone. This one, however, had been built with a new understanding of chaos theory, one that Eggman had purchased from a disgruntled former scientist in Station Square at great expense. When Sonic arrived, blue blur skidding to a halt atop a hill overlooking the valley where the condenser hummed with barely contained power, he expected the usual: the trap springs, the badnik swarms, the inevitable moment when Eggman would monologue about his genius before everything exploded in his face. What he did not expect was the stillness. The badniks weren't moving, not because they'd been deactivated, but because they stood frozen in place, optical sensors tracking something in the sky above the condenser. Even Eggman, visible through the observation window of his floating command deck, had stopped his usual gesturing to stare upward. Sonic followed their gaze. Above the condenser's primary energy dish, where focused chaos energy was meant to coalesce into a controlled beam, the air had begun to breathe. It pulsed with a light that wasn't quite gold and wasn't quite silver, a color that existed somewhere between the Chaos Emerald's brilliance and something else entirely, something foreign. Tails, Sonic whispered into the communication device nestled against his ear. You seeing this? From his workshop miles away, Miles, Tails Prower, watched through satellite feeds and ground-level cameras he'd positioned across the zone. His twin tails twitched nervously as he processed the energy signatures. Sonic, the chaos readings are off the scale, but they're wrong. Chaos energy has a specific frequency pattern. This is similar, but it's layered with something else, something organic. The pulse quickened, and then the portals opened. Not with violence, not with the explosive force of reality breaking. They bloomed, circles of that impossible light appearing across Green Hill Zone, across the Emerald Coast, across Angel Island's floating mass, and the dusty canyons of Sand Hill. Each portal was maybe 10 feet in diameter, hanging in the air like wounds that did not bleed, but instead breathed. Through them came silence first. Then came the Pokémon. In what would later be called the first emergence event, witnesses reported different experiences based on where they stood. In Green Hill, a family of chow playing near a stream looked up to see small, rodent-like creatures with red cheeks tumbling through a portal that opened just above the water. The creatures, Pikachu, though no one in this world would know that name for hours yet, landed with surprising grace, their eyes wide with confusion, their bodies sparking with electricity that interacted strangely with the ambient chaos energy. The electricity didn't just discharge, it warped, forming patterns in the air that lingered like afterimages, tracing the paths of frightened Pokémon as they explored this impossible new world. Near the coast, a portal opened above the waves, and from it fell what appeared to be a small blue fish with a star-shaped tail. It struck the water and immediately began swimming in panicked circles, its light glowing brighter with each passing moment as chaos energy saturated its tiny form. On Angel Island, Knuckles the Echidna felt the disturbance before he saw it. The Master Emerald, resting in its altar within the hidden palace, had begun to sing, a low, resonant tone that he'd only heard twice before in his centuries of guardianship. Both times had preceded catastrophe. He found the portal in the island's central jungle, hovering above the ancient ruins his people had left behind. Through it stepped creatures that made his warrior's instincts flare with immediate alertness. A massive bird wreathed in flames, its wings leaving trails of fire that did not burn the foliage it passed through. A serpentine dragon with crystalline wings that caught the light and scattered it like diamonds, and smaller forms, dozens of them, pouring through like refugees from a world on fire. The flaming bird, Moltres, though Knuckles had no name for it, spread its wings and screamed. The sound carried heat, a wave of warmth that washed over the island and caused the local flora to steam. But beneath the heat was something else, fear, pure, ancient, territorial fear. Knuckles gripped the Master Emerald shard he always carried and felt its warmth pulse against his chest. "What are you?" he breathed. The bird's eyes locked onto him. For a moment, Knuckles saw recognition there, not of him specifically, but of what he carried. The shard, the emerald, the chaos. Then the bird launched itself skyward, and the other legendary Pokémon followed. And the Knuckles understood with growing dread that this was only the beginning. Sonic moved. He always moved. It was who he was, what he did, the fundamental truth of his existence. When chaos erupted, literally in this case, Sonic ran toward it. Not because he was reckless, though he supposed that was part of it, but because standing still meant someone else would have to solve the problem. And usually by the time they figured it out, it was too late. So, he ran. The first Pokémon he encountered directly was a small green creature with a plant bulb on its back, a Bulbasaur, though Sonic would learn that name later, that had appeared in the middle of a road just as a truck carrying Eggman's captured animals barreled toward it. The creature stood frozen, not with fear, but with confusion, its large eyes tracking the vehicle as if trying to understand what metal monsters were and why one was about to end its existence. Sonic didn't think. He never did. He just moved. The truck's driver, a reluctant Eggman employee named Agent 37, who had signed up for technical work and somehow ended up transporting living cargo through unstable dimensional portals, felt his vehicle lurch sideways as something blue and impossibly fast struck its side. Not a collision, but a redirect. A force applied at exactly the right angle to send the truck skidding into a spin rather than a collision. By the time the truck stopped, its front bumper inches from a tree, Sonic stood between it and the Bulbasaur, hands on his hips, grinning that infuriating grin. "Next time, pal," he said to the trembling Agent 37. "Maybe watch where you're going? Wouldn't want to hurt the new neighbors." The Bulbasaur stared at him. Its bulb pulsed with a soft light, and Sonic felt something brush against his mind. Not words, not images, but an impression, gratitude, confusion, and beneath that, a deep, aching loneliness. "Hey, little guy." Sonic crouched, moving slowly. An effort for him, slowing down always required effort. "You're a long way from home, huh?" The Bulbasaur took a tentative step toward him, then another. Its vines extended, reaching out, and Sonic felt them wrap gently around his arm. Not restraining, holding. From somewhere distant, a voice shouted, human, young, terrified. "Bulbasaur!" A boy came running through the trees, maybe 12 years old, with a cap pulled low over his eyes and a companion at his side. A small yellow creature with long ears and a jagged stripe of red across its cheeks. The Pikachu that had emerged earlier, Sonic realized. But this one moved with purpose, with connection. Its eyes locked on the boy with an intensity that spoke of years of partnership. The boy, Ash Ketchum from Pallet Town, though he had no way to explain that to anyone here, skidded to a halt when he saw Sonic. His Pikachu's cheeks sparked warningly, but Ash held up a hand. Wait, Pikachu. Look. He pointed at the Bulbasaur wrapped around Sonic's arm, its body relaxed in a way it hadn't been since the portals opened. Sonic looked at the boy. The boy looked at Sonic. And somewhere in the distance, a legendary Pokemon's cry echoed across a world that had never known such creatures existed. "We need to figure this out," Ash said, "together." Sonic considered this. He considered the boy's earnest expression, the protective way his Pikachu stood at his side, the Bulbasaur now pressing against his leg like a lost child seeking comfort. He considered the chaos energy still humming in the air, the portals that hadn't closed, the flaming bird he'd seen briefly before it disappeared toward the mountains. "Tails," he said into his communicator. "We've got visitors, and I think they're going to need a guide." The day wore on. Across the world, similar scenes played out. Pokemon appeared in forests and cities, on beaches and mountains. Some adapted quickly, the water types finding solace in Sonic's oceans, the flying types taking to unfamiliar skies with cautious exploration. Others struggled, their bodies and instincts ill-equipped for a world where chaos energy permeated everything like a second atmosphere. Tails worked furiously in his workshop, analyzing data from every sensor he could access. The patterns emerged slowly, then all at once. "The chaos energy here," he explained to Sonic via video link, his voice carrying the excitement of discovery tempered by scientific concern. "It's not just ambient, it's active. It responds to emotion, to intention, to will. And it's interacting with these creatures, these Pokemon, in ways I can't predict." He pulled up readings from a Pikachu that had been caught on camera near Station Square. "Watch. This Pikachu used an electrical attack. They call it Thunderbolt, according to the translation device I'm building from the boy Ash's descriptions. But look at the energy signature." The footage showed a Pikachu defending itself from a curious but aggressive badnik. When it released its electricity, the energy didn't just arc and dissipate. It resonated, forming patterns in the air that lingered for seconds after the attack ended. "That's chaos energy," Tails said, "not the electricity itself. That's pure Pokemon biology. But the resonance, the way it interacts with the environment, that's chaos. These creatures aren't just living in our world. They're merging with it. Their abilities are being fundamentally altered by exposure to chaos fields." Sonic frowned. "Is that dangerous?" "Unknown. Some Pokemon seem to be adapting well. Others—" Tails pulled up another feed, this one showing a small water type. A Psyduck, Ash had called it, standing paralyzed in the middle of a stream, its eyes glowing with an intensity that worried even the untrained observer. Others are experiencing what I can only describe as energy overload. Their bodies weren't designed for this level of ambient chaos. It's like trying to run software on hardware that wasn't built for it. On Angel Island, Knuckles felt the Master Emerald's song grow louder. He stood before it now, watching as cracks of light spread across its surface. Not damaging cracks, but responsive ones, as if the emerald was reaching out to something. The Chaos Emeralds are reacting too. Shadow's voice came through the communicator Knuckles had reluctantly begun carrying. The ultimate life form had been monitoring the situation from his own position near the Ark, and his reports were characteristically terse but precise. Each emerald is resonating at a frequency that matches specific energy signatures from the Pokémon world. The green emerald synchronizes with what the humans call grass types, the blue with water, the red with fire. Shadow paused, and when he spoke again, his voice carried something rare: uncertainty. The yellow emerald is responding to Pikachu, specifically to that Pikachu, the one traveling with the human boy. The resonance is emotional. I've never seen chaos energy behave this way. Knuckles placed his hand on the Master Emerald's surface, feeling its warmth, its ancient awareness. It's not just chaos energy, Shadow. It's them. These creatures, they're not like anything in our world. They're born connected to forces we can barely comprehend. And now those forces are colliding with chaos. He looked out through the cave's entrance toward the distant mountains where the flaming bird had disappeared. The question isn't whether this world can survive their presence. The question is whether they can survive ours. By evening, the situation had stabilized enough for Sonic to gather the key players at Tails' workshop. Ash sat cross-legged on the floor, his Pikachu in his lap. Bulbasaur curled beside him. Tails worked at his consoles, occasionally glancing back with barely contained scientific curiosity. Knuckles had descended from Angel Island, the Master Emerald shard glowing against his chest. Shadow stood apart, arms crossed, watching the proceedings with calculating crimson eyes. And Eggman, surprisingly, had requested a meeting. "Don't look at me like that, Hedgehog," Eggman said through the video screen he'd patched into Tails' systems. "I'm not your friend, but I'm not stupid either. These creatures, these Pokémon, represent an opportunity and a threat, and I'd rather understand both before I act." Sonic snorted. "Since when do you wait to act?" "Since the flaming bird of death destroyed my primary construction facility." Eggman's mustache twitched with irritation. "Did you know that creature can fly through solid metal? I have 17 million rings worth of damage and 3 injured employees. So yes, Sonic, even I can exercise restraint when the alternative is extinction." Tails pulled up footage of the incident. Moltres, the name had been confirmed by Ash, who recognized the legendary bird from stories, had indeed torn through Eggman's facility like it was paper. But as they watched the footage, something became clear. The bird hadn't been attacking. It had been fleeing. Something had terrified it. "Look," Tails said, enhancing a frame. "Behind it, in the shadows." They saw it then, a shape vaguely humanoid, with glowing eyes and an aura of malevolent purpose. It moved through the facility's shadows like they were doors, appearing and disappearing, always following, always watching. Ash's face went pale. That can't be. That's not possible." "What is it?" Sonic asked. "A Pokémon, a dark type called Greninja. But not just any Greninja." Ash swallowed hard. "That's my Greninja, or it was. It stayed behind in our world to protect something important. How did it get here? And why does it look so wrong?" The footage showed Greninja emerging fully from shadow, and they all saw it. The purple-black energy that coiled around its body like living chains, the way its eyes glowed not with the usual red of its kind, but with something darker, something hungry. "It's been exposed to chaos energy," Shadow said quietly. "Prolonged exposure. And it's not adapting, it's absorbing. The chaos is changing it." Greninja looked up directly at the camera, and for a moment, they all felt it. A wave of pure, concentrated intent. Not malevolence, not exactly. Something more complicated, something that felt like a question or a plea or a warning. Then it vanished into shadow, and the connection broke. Night fell across both worlds. The portal still hung in the sky, pulsing gently, neither closing nor expanding. Through them, occasionally, more Pokémon appeared. Some by accident, some drawn by curiosity, some fleeing threats that could not follow. Each arrival sent ripples through the chaos fields, through the Master Emerald's song, through the hearts of everyone who watched. On a hill overlooking Tails' workshop, Sonic sat alone for perhaps the first time in his life. Not running, not moving, just sitting, watching the stars that were not quite his stars, wondering about a world he'd never seen. Ash found him there, Pikachu at his side. Mind if I join you? Sonic shrugged, which Ash took as permission. The boy sat, and for a while they just looked at the sky. In my world, Ash said finally, Pokemon and humans have been together for as long as anyone can remember. Not always peacefully, not always well, but together. We learn from each other. We grow together. It's not about control, it's about connection. Sonic considered this. In my world, we don't have that. We have friends, sure. Tails, Knuckles, Amy, the others. But we're all individuals. We choose to work together because we want to, not because we're bound by anything. Bound. Ash repeated the word carefully. Is that how you see it? As being bound? I see creatures who fight when humans tell them to, who stay with humans even when those humans make mistakes, who... Sonic stopped, struggling to articulate something he didn't fully understand. I see dependence, and in my experience, dependence leads to control, and control leads to tyranny. Pikachu's ears twitched. It looked at Ash, then at Sonic, and then, slowly, deliberately, walked over to the hedgehog. It reached up, touching his arm with a small paw. Sonic felt it again, that brush of consciousness, that wordless communication. But this time, there were impressions beneath it. Memories, maybe, or echoes of memories. A boy and a Pikachu meeting for the first time, the boy scared, the Pikachu angry. A storm, a sacrifice, a bond forged not through commands, but through choice. You feel that? Ash asked quietly. That's what it's really like. We don't command them, we ask, and they choose to stay. Every day they choose, just like your friends choose you. Sonic looked at Pikachu, at its bright eyes and sparking cheeks, and for the first time, he understood that he'd been wrong. This wasn't dependence. This was something else entirely. In the hidden palace on Angel Island, the Master Emerald began to crack. Not shatter, crack. Hairline fractures spreading across its surface like veins of light, each one pulsing with a frequency that matched the portals, matched the Chaos Emeralds, matched something deep beneath the island itself. Knuckles felt it from the workshop, felt it through the shard he carried, and he was running before he fully understood why. By the time he reached the palace, the cracks had spread to the walls, to the floor, to the ancient carvings his ancestors had left behind. The entire island was resonating, vibrating with a power that threatened to tear it apart. And in the center of it all, standing before the Master Emerald with one hand pressed against its fractured surface, stood Shadow. I didn't do this, Shadow said before Knuckles could speak. But I know what did. He pointed, and Knuckles followed his gaze to the palace's entrance, where a shape had materialized from the night. small, almost childlike, with silver hair and ancient eyes and an aura of pure, concentrated time. The Pokémon, Celebi, the voice of the forest, looked at them with something like sorrow. And then it spoke, not in words, but in images, flooding their minds with a vision of what was to come. Chaos energy merging with evolution, reality tearing at the seams, two worlds colliding until neither survived. Stop it, Knuckles breathed. How do we stop it? Celebi's image answer was simple, devastating, and final. You don't. You adapt, or you fall. The vision ended, the cracks remained, and somewhere in the darkness, Greninja watched and waited and changed. End of segment 1. Creatures of Bond in a World of Speed. The morning after the emergence brought something unexpected: organization. Ash had spent the night communicating with other trainers who'd been pulled through the portals, a patchwork network of displaced humans and Pokémon, scattered across Sonic's world but connected through the translation devices Tails had hastily distributed. By dawn, they'd established a rough census. Approximately 200 trainers, nearly 1,000 Pokémon, representing every region Ash had ever visited, and several he hadn't. This is bad, Ash told Sonic as they reviewed the numbers in Tails' workshop. Not the numbers themselves. 1,000 Pokémon isn't that many, all things considered. But look at the distribution. He pointed to the map Tails had created, showing Pokémon concentrations across the continent. We've got water types concentrated near the coasts, grass types in the forests, fire types in the mountain regions. That's natural. They're seeking environments similar to their homes. But look at the legendary signatures. Tails had marked each confirmed legendary sighting with a glowing icon. Moltres in the mountains, Suicune near the coast, Raikou in the plains, and others, fainter, harder to confirm, scattered across the map like stars. They're not gathering, Shadow observed from his corner. They're patrolling, establishing territories, defending borders that don't exist yet. Against what? Sonic asked. Against each other. Ash's voice was grim. Legendary Pokémon aren't like regular Pokémon. They embody natural forces: fire, water, lightning, time, space, everything in between. In our world, they maintain balance through an ancient understanding. But here, he gestured at the chaos fields still pulsing faintly into the air. Here, the rules are different. The chaos energy is disrupting their equilibrium, making them territorial, aggressive. As if to prove his point, a tremor ran through the ground, distant but powerful, carrying with it the echo of something massive in motion. Tails checked his sensors. That's coming from the mountains. Moltres is moving, and it's not alone. The battle, when it happened, was brief and terrifying. Sonic reached the mountain range within minutes, Tails flying overhead in the tornado, Ash and Pikachu clinging to the plane's wing with a combination of terror and determination that Sonic had to admire. What they found was chaos, literal and figurative. Moltres faced off against Entei, the volcano Pokémon, in a valley that had already been reduced to molten rock and ash. The fire types battle sent waves of heat across the landscape, igniting forests miles away, warping the very air with their fury. But they weren't alone. Suicune stood at the valley's edge, her crystal fur reflecting the flames, her eyes tracking the battle with ancient calculation. Raikou prowled the ridges, lightning dancing across its mane. And overhead, circling with predatory patience, Ho-Oh spread rainbow wings that caught the dawn light and scattered it like promises. They're not fighting each other, Ash realized. They're waiting. For what? The answer came from below. The ground split open, and from the fissure rose Groudon, the continent Pokémon, embodiment of land itself. Its massive form blotted out the sun, and when it roared, the mountains shook and the sky darkened with ash. Opposite it, from the ocean that bordered the valley, Kyogre emerged. The sea basin Pokemon's body seemed to absorb light, creating a void that pulled at the eyes, at the soul, at the very fabric of reality. Oh no, Ash breathed. No, no, no. What? Sonic demanded. What's happening? Groudon and Kyogre, they're ancient enemies. In our world, they only awaken when the balance of nature is threatened. And when they fight, Ash's voice failed him. When they fight, Tails finished, reading from his translation device, they reshape the world. Continents rise, oceans flood. The planet itself becomes their battlefield. Below, Moltres and Entei ceased their battle, retreating to opposite sides of the valley as Groudon and Kyogre advanced toward each other. The other legendaries watched, silent, waiting for a signal only they could perceive. We have to stop them, Sonic said. How? Shadow's voice was cold, practical. Those aren't Eggman's machines. They're not badniks. They're forces of nature. You can't outrun nature. You can't, Sonic agreed, but maybe you can outthink it. He looked at Ash. You said these creatures maintain balance through ancient understanding. What does that mean? How does it work? Ash struggled to find words. It's not something humans control. The legendaries have their own hierarchy, their own rules. When the balance is threatened, they respond, but not randomly. There's always a purpose, always a pattern. Then we need to find the pattern. Sonic turned to Tails. Can you track their energy signatures? Map them against the chaos fields, the portal locations, everything? Tails nodded, already working. It'll take time, and we'll need data from everywhere. Angel Island, the Ark, Eggman's facilities. Then we get it. Sonic looked at Shadow. You're the chaos expert. Can you feel what they're feeling? Sense what they're responding to? Shadow closed his eyes, reaching out with his connection to chaos. For a long moment, he was silent. Then, they're afraid. The admission shocked them all. Shadow, who feared nothing, who had faced death and darkness and his own painful origins without flinching, even he seemed unsettled by what he sensed. Not of each other, not of us, of something else, something that's coming. The chaos energy is a symptom, not the cause. These creatures are reacting to a threat we can't see. He opened his eyes, and for the first time since the emergence began, Shadow looked uncertain. The portals aren't just bringing Pokémon here. They're connected to something, something that's following them through. Eggman's laboratory was everything Ash had feared and worse. The scientist had wasted no time. Within hours of the first emergence, his badniks had captured nearly 36 Pokémon. Small ones, weak ones, creatures that couldn't defend themselves against metal and programming. They were contained now in energy fields, their bodies twitching with the strain of exposure to Eggman's chaos-enhancing technology. Fascinating, Eggman murmured, studying readings from a Pikachu that had been separated from its trainer. The chaos energy doesn't just affect their abilities, it's rewriting their fundamental biology. Look at these readings. The electrical output has increased by 400% since exposure. And the cellular regeneration rate, he tapped a control, and the Pikachu screamed, a sound of pure agony as another wave of chaos energy surged through its containment field. Stop it! The shout came from behind him. Eggman turned to find a young trainer. A girl, maybe 14, with a cap pulled low and tears streaming down her face, standing in the laboratory doorway, a small Evie trembling at her side. "You're hurting them," she said. "Please, please stop." Eggman's expression softened, not with sympathy, but with the patience of a predator who knew his prey couldn't escape. "My dear child, I'm not hurting them. I'm studying them. There's a difference." "There isn't." The girl stepped forward, Evie matching her movement. "In my world, we have people like you. They always say they're just studying. They always end up causing suffering." Eggman sighed. "I don't have time for this." He pressed a button, and badniks emerged from the shadows, surrounding the girl and her Pokémon. "Take them to containment. Gently. They're more valuable intact." The girl's Eevee moved faster than Eggman anticipated. It leaped, body glowing with an intensity that spoke of evolution barely contained, and struck the nearest badnik with enough force to shatter its casing. But there were too many. Within moments, both girl and Pokemon were restrained, dragged toward empty containment fields. "Wait!" The voice came from everywhere and nowhere. Eggman spun, searching for its source, but the laboratory was empty except for his prisoners and his machines. Then the shadows moved. Greninja emerged from the darkness like a nightmare given form, its body wreathed in that same purple-black chaos energy they'd seen before. Its eyes locked on Eggman, and the scientist felt something he hadn't felt in years: genuine, primal fear. "You will release them." Greninja's voice was a rasp, a whisper, a threat made audible. "You will release all of them, or I will show you what happens when chaos meets a creature that has already learned to absorb it." Eggman's hand moved toward an emergency control, but Greninja was faster. Not moving exactly, but being where it needed to be, appearing before him with that same shadow-walking speed. "I am not your enemy," Greninja said, "but I am not your friend. I am a warning. And if you continue down this path, I will become something far worse." It vanished, and with it went the containment fields. The captured Pokemon fell to the floor, free, confused, but alive. The girl and her Eevee were gone too, transported somewhere safe by powers Eggman couldn't begin to understand. He stood alone in his laboratory, surrounded by shattered machines and the lingering echo of a threat he couldn't forget. And somewhere in the darkness, Greninja watched and waited and learned. Tails' workshop had become a hub of activity. Trainers came and went, sharing information, comparing experiences, trying to make sense of a world that operated on fundamentally different rules. Their Pokemon adapted as best they could, some thriving in the chaos-rich environment, others struggling with energy overload, all of them changed by exposure to forces their bodies had never been designed to process. Tails himself was in his element, moving between workstations, collecting data, building theories. But even he was reaching limits. "The problem," he explained to Sonic, Ash, and the others during a brief lull, "is that evolution in Pokemon isn't just physical growth. It's transformative. A Pokemon that evolves doesn't just get bigger or stronger, it becomes something new at a fundamental level." He pulled up readings from a Caterpie that had evolved into Metapod shortly after arriving. Watch the energy signature before and after evolution. Before, it's stable, consistent with the Pokemon's biology. After, the readings spiked, then stabilized at a new baseline. After, it's adapted. The chaos energy has been incorporated. This Pokemon didn't just evolve, it evolved for this world. Ash leaned forward. "That's normal. Pokemon evolution always adapts to environment. But the speed? Exactly. Tails nodded. The speed is unprecedented. Evolution that would take weeks or months in your world is happening in hours here. The chaos energy is accelerating the process, forcing adaptation. And that's bad, Sonic asked. Unknown. For some Pokemon, it seems beneficial. They're becoming stronger, more resilient, better suited to this environment. For others, Tails pulled up another reading, this one from a Psyduck that had been found in a state of near catatonia. For others, the acceleration is too fast. Their bodies can't keep up. The evolution starts, but it can't complete. They get stuck between forms, between states, between selves. The Psyduck's image showed flickering energy signatures, partial transformations, a creature trapped in perpetual becoming. Sonic looked away. Can we help them? We're trying. Tails' voice carried the weight of too many failures. But we don't understand the mechanism well enough yet. Evolution in your world is biological, genetic, environmental, natural. Here, it's being driven by chaos energy, and chaos energy responds to emotion, to intention, to will. A Pokemon that's scared, confused, or traumatized might evolve in ways that amplify those feelings. Shadow spoke from his corner. The same is true for chaos control. Negative emotions produce destructive results. Positive emotions produce constructive ones. If evolution is now tied to chaos, then emotional state matters more than ever. Ash looked at Pikachu, who sat quietly at his side. In our world, the bond between trainer and Pokemon helps regulate evolution. The trust, the understanding, it provides stability. A Pokemon that feels safe and loved evolves more smoothly than one that's stressed or afraid. Sonic considered this. So the trainers aren't just handlers, they're anchors, emotional anchors. That's one way to put it. Ash smiled slightly. I prefer to think of it as partnership. We help each other grow, not just physically, emotionally, spiritually, in every way that matters. Evolution isn't just about becoming stronger. It's about becoming more, more yourself, more connected, more alive. The room was quiet for a moment. Then, we need to find a way to protect the Pokemon who can't adapt, Tails said. And we need to understand why some are adapting and others aren't. And we need to figure out what's happening with the legendaries before they tear this world apart. He looked at Sonic. Any ideas? Sonic thought about the girl and her EV, about Ash and Pikachu, about the captured Pokemon Greninja had freed. He thought about Moltres and Entei, about Groudon and Kyogre, about forces so vast they defied comprehension. One, he said, we stop treating this like an invasion and start treating it like what it is, a collision. Two worlds, two systems, two ways of being. The Pokemon aren't here to conquer us. They're here because something brought them here. And until we figure out what that something is, we need to keep them alive and keep them calm. He stood, stretching in that way he had. Not tired, just ready. Tails, keep working on the science. Ash, coordinate with the trainers. Keep everyone calm, keep everyone connected. Shadow, track the legendaries. Figure out what they're responding to. And Knuckles, he paused, considering. Knuckles, talk to the Master Emerald. It's been reacting to all of this since the beginning. Maybe it knows something we don't. Knuckles nodded, hand moving unconsciously to the shard at his chest. And you? Sonic grinned, that familiar, infuriating, inspiring grin. Me? I'm gonna find out what scared those legendaries so badly they're ready to destroy the world to stop it. The Ark had been abandoned for years. Once a pinnacle of human achievement, then a site of tragedy, then a prison, then a memory. The space station now orbited Sonic's world in silence, its systems running on automatic, its corridors empty of all but ghosts. But not entirely empty. Shadow had come here seeking answers. The chaos energy readings from the station were anomalous, different from anything on the surface, different even from the readings near the portals. If there was a pattern to be found, he'd find it here. What he found instead was Mewtwo. The genetic Pokémon waited for him in the station's main observation deck, floating cross-legged above the floor, its eyes closed in meditation. It did not move when Shadow entered, but Shadow felt its awareness like a weight, an intelligence vast and ancient and deeply, profoundly tired. "You are not the one I expected," Mewtwo said without opening its eyes, "but perhaps you are the one I need." Shadow approached cautiously, chaos energy gathering at his feet. "You know why I'm here. I know why you think you're here." Mewtwo opened its eyes, and Shadow saw himself reflected in them. Not his form, but his essence, his chaos, his carefully constructed identity. You seek patterns, causes, solutions, but the patterns you seek are not the patterns that matter. Then enlighten me. Mewtwo descended slowly, landing on the deck with a grace that spoke of complete control. In your world, chaos energy is the foundation of reality. It responds to emotion, to will, to the deepest desires of sentient beings. In my world, evolution serves the same function, not the energy itself, but the process, the constant becoming, the endless growth. It gestured, and the observation deck's windows showed them both worlds, the one below, green and blue and pulsing with life, and the one above, visible through portals that hung in space like wounds. Now these two foundations are merging. Chaos energy is accelerating evolution. Evolution is reshaping chaos. And at the center of it all, something is watching. Something that has waited for this moment across countless cycles of existence. Shadow felt a chill that had nothing to do with temperature. What? Mewtwo's expression didn't change, but something in its eyes shifted. A recognition, a resignation, a warning. A force that exists between worlds, between states of being, between evolution and chaos, growth and freedom, partnership and independence. It has no name in your language. In mine, it is called the void between. And it is hungry. The station shuddered, alarms blared, and through the windows, Shadow saw something impossible. A portal opening not between worlds, but beyond them. A tear in reality that showed not another dimension, but the absence of dimension. The nothing that existed before something, the silence before the first word. From that void, something looked back. And for the first time in his existence, Shadow the Hedgehog knew what it meant to be truly afraid. When evolution accelerates. The morning of the third day brought transformation. It began subtly. A Pidgey whose feathers caught the light differently. A Rattata whose movement seemed slightly too fast. A Bellsprout whose vines reached farther than they should. Small changes, easily overlooked by those not paying attention. But the trainers noticed. "They're evolving too fast," Ash reported to the gathered group. "Not just the ones exposed to high chaos concentrations, all of them. Something's changed in the baseline energy. The evolution threshold has dropped." Tails verified this with his instruments. He's right, the chaos field strength has increased by 300% across the board. Not evenly. There are hotspots forming, areas where the energy concentrates like storm systems. But everywhere, the baseline is higher. Pokémon are evolving just by existing here. The implications were staggering. Evolution in Ash's world was a milestone, a moment of growth earned through experience, trust, and readiness. Here it was becoming inevitable, unstoppable, and not always welcome. A trainer named Serena reported that her Eevee had evolved into 3 different forms in as many hours, cycling through evolutions so rapidly its body couldn't stabilize. A young boy named Max watched in horror as his Ralts evolved into Kirlia, then into Gardevoir, then into something else, a form none of them recognized, wreathed in chaos energy and screaming with a voice that wasn't quite its own. We have to slow this down, Ash insisted. If this keeps happening, Pokemon will evolve themselves out of existence. They'll burn through their life cycles in days instead of decades. Sonic looked at Tails. Can we create a dampening field? Something to reduce chaos exposure? I can try. Tails was already working. But the energy isn't just in the air, it's in the ground, the water, everything. We'd need to shield every Pokemon individually, and we don't have the resources for that. Shadow spoke from his corner. The hotspots you mentioned, where are they concentrated? Tails pulled up a map. Here, here, and here. One near the mountains where Moltres made its stand. One near the coast where Kyogre emerged. And one, he paused, zooming in. One on Angel Island, directly beneath the Master Emerald. Knuckles was already moving. I need to get back, now! Angel Island had changed. The jungle that covered its surface, once vibrant and alive, now pulsed with an inner light. Chaos energy visible through leaves and branches, through soil and stone. The ancient ruins that dotted the landscape glowed with symbols Knuckles had never seen, writing that predated his ancestors, warnings from a time before time. And at the island's heart, the Master Emerald had begun to sing. Not the low resonance Knuckles had felt before. This was different, higher, more complex. A melody that wove through the chaos energy like a voice through conversation, demanding attention, demanding response. Knuckles found the chamber in chaos. Pokemon had gathered there. Not attacking, not threatening, just present. Dozens of them, representing species from across Ash's world, arranged in concentric circles around the Master Emerald. They sat in meditation poses, their eyes closed, their bodies pulsing with the same inner light that now suffused the island. At the center, touching the Master Emerald itself, sat Mew. The new species Pokemon was smaller than Knuckles had expected, barely 2 feet tall, with large eyes and a tail that seemed to exist partly outside reality. But its presence was immense, filling the chamber with an awareness that pressed against Knuckles' mind like a gentle question. You feel it, Mew said, not speaking aloud but projecting directly into consciousness. The merging, the becoming, the change. Knuckles approached slowly, one hand on his shard. What's happening to my island? Your island is becoming what it was always meant to be, a nexus, a meeting point, a place where worlds touch and remember. Mew's eyes opened, and Knuckles saw infinite depths in them, memories of the world's birth, of the first Pokemon, of forces so ancient they predated language. The Master Emerald is not just a power source, it is a record. Everything that has ever happened in this world is written in its crystals. And now it is reading another world, learning it, becoming it. The Pokemon around them began to glow, not with evolution, but with something deeper. Their forms flickered, shifted, remembered forms they'd worn in ages past, forms they might wear in ages to come. They're evolving backward, Knuckles realized, and forward, and sideways, in all directions at once. Time is not a line here, Mew agreed. It is a sphere, a loop, a dance. Your chaos energy has freed my kind from the constraints of linear existence. We are becoming what we always were, creatures of pure potential. Knuckles thought of the trainers waiting below, the bonds they'd formed with their Pokémon, the careful growth that had shaped those relationships over years. But if Pokémon can become anything at any time, what happens to the connections they've built? What happens to trust? Mew was silent for a long moment. Then, that is the question, isn't it? The question that keeps me here. It floated closer, its ancient eyes meeting Knuckles' younger ones. In my world, evolution is a promise, a commitment. A trainer and Pokémon grow together, face challenges together, become together. The evolution is proof of their bond, a physical manifestation of trust earned over time. It gestured at the flickering forms around them. Here, evolution is becoming automatic, inevitable. A Pokémon can evolve without earning it, without trusting it, without wanting it. And that changes everything. Knuckles understood. If evolution doesn't require trust anymore, then trainers become optional. Yes, Mew's voice carried sorrow. And when trainers become optional, what happens to the bond that has defined our existence for millennia? What happens to us? The question echoed across both worlds. In the makeshift camps where trainers had gathered, Pokémon were changing. Some welcomed it, evolving into forms they'd always dreamed of, gaining power they'd never imagined. Others fought it, clinging to their current selves with desperate will. But the chaos energy was relentless. Evolution came whether they wanted it or not. A trainer named May watched her Torchic evolve into Combusken, then into Blaziken, then into something that wasn't quite Blaziken, a form wreathed in flames that burned blue and black, its eyes empty of recognition. When she called to it, it didn't respond. When she approached, it struck out, nearly killing her before other trainers pulled her away. A trainer named Drew watched his Roselia evolve into Roserade, then into a form that seemed to be made of crystal and light, beautiful, distant, untouchable. It looked at him once with eyes that held no memory of their years together, and then vanished into the chaos fields, seeking something it could no longer find in human connection. And everywhere, the legendaries watched and waited and remembered. Sonic found Greninja in the mountains. The transformed Pokémon sat on a ridge overlooking the valley where Groudon and Kyogre still faced each other, their standoff frozen but not resolved. It didn't turn when Sonic approached, but Sonic felt its awareness shift, a pressure against his consciousness, a question without words. "You're not like the others," Sonic said, settling onto the ridge beside it. "You're not evolving randomly. You're not losing yourself. What's your secret?" Greninja was silent for a long moment. Then, "I have nothing left to lose." Its voice was a rasp, a whisper, a wound made audible. "I was already changed before I came here, already touched by forces beyond understanding, already broken in ways that made me more than I was." Sonic thought of the stories Ash had told, of a Greninja that had stayed behind to protect something precious, that had sacrificed connection for duty, that had chosen solitude over partnership. "You chose this. I chose protection. The transformation was incidental." Greninja finally turned to look at him, and Sonic saw the cost of its choices written in its eyes. Years of loneliness, of watching from shadows, of being needed but never held. "I thought I was strong enough to bear it." I thought isolation was a price I could pay. But now, in this world, with chaos energy rewriting everything I am, it looked away. I'm beginning to forget their faces, their voices, the way it felt to be known. Sonic didn't have words for this. He'd never been alone. Not really. Even when he ran by himself, he carried his friends with him, their trust, their faith, their love. The thought of losing that, of becoming something that couldn't remember being loved, that's what's happening to them, isn't it? He asked quietly. The Pokémon who are evolving too fast. They're not just changing physically, they're losing their connections, their memories, the bonds that made them who they were. Greninja nodded. Evolution without context is just change. Change without meaning is just fading. They're becoming powerful, yes, but they're also becoming empty. Vessels for chaos energy with nothing inside to guide it. Is there a way to stop it? The chaos energy itself? No. It's everywhere now, and it's not going away. But the evolution, Greninja considered. The evolution is accelerated by emotional resonance, fear, confusion, desperation. If the Pokémon could feel safe, truly safe, deeply connected, the acceleration might slow. They might regain control. Sonic stood, looking out at the valley where legendaries faced each other, at the world where chaos and evolution merged, at the impossible situation they all found themselves in. So we give them safety. We give them connection. We remind them what it means to be with someone, not just near them. Greninja almost smiled. Easier said than done. When has that ever stopped me? Sonic grinned, and for a moment, Greninja saw in him something it had almost forgotten. The brightness of a spirit that refused to dim, the speed of a heart that never stopped reaching. You remind me of him, Greninja said, the boy I protected. He never stopped either. Then let's make sure he has something to come back to. Sonic offered his hand, an odd gesture in a world where hands were rarely used this way, but Greninja understood. Partners? Greninja looked at the offered hand, at the hedgehog who moved faster than thought but had stopped to listen, at the impossible hope that somehow, despite everything, things might still be okay. It took his hand. Partners. The battle for Angel Island began at sunset. Eggman had waited, planned, prepared. While the heroes focused on legendaries and evolution crises, he'd studied the Master Emerald's energy patterns, mapped its vulnerabilities, designed a machine that could do what no machine had ever done, control the nexus of chaos itself. His fleet arrived without warning. Dozens of airships, hundreds of badniks, weapons designed specifically to counter the Pokémon abilities Tails had documented. By the time anyone realized what was happening, Eggman's forces had established a perimeter around the island's core, cutting off access to the Master Emerald Chamber. Inside, Knuckles fought alongside the gathered Pokémon, Mew's power amplifying their abilities, but the numbers were overwhelming. For every Badnik destroyed, two more took its place. For every wave repelled, another surged forward. We can't hold much longer, Knuckles shouted, punching through a Badnik's casing. Mew, can you? I am maintaining the stability field. Mew's voice was strained. If I stop, the evolution acceleration will resume. The Pokémon here will lose themselves completely. From above, Eggman's voice echoed through speakers. Surrender the Master Emerald, Guardian, and I'll let your new friends leave unharmed. Refuse, and I'll demonstrate exactly what happens when chaos energy meets focused, controlled application. Knuckles looked at the Pokémon around him, creatures from another world, fighting for a home that wasn't theirs, for a guardian they'd never met, for reasons he couldn't begin to understand. They should have fled, should have saved themselves. Instead, they stood with him. Why? He asked a nearby Gardevoir, its form flickering with barely contained evolution energy. Why do you fight for this place? The Gardevoir's answer came not in words, but in feeling, a wash of warmth, of belonging, of home. It had found something here, in this island, in this battle, in this moment, something worth protecting. They're not fighting for the island, Knuckles realized. They're fighting for each other. And then the sky tore open and Sonic arrived. He came not alone, but leading, a wave of trainers and Pokémon, of Tails' technology and Shadow's chaos control, of everything they'd gathered and learned and become over 3 impossible days. They struck Eggman's perimeter from every direction at once, overwhelming his forces with sheer numbers and, more importantly, with trust. Pokémon fought beside trainers who'd earned their loyalty. Trainers fought beside hedgehogs who'd proven their worth. And at the center of it all, Sonic and Greninja moved as one. Speed and shadow, light and darkness, two beings who'd found in each other something neither had expected. Greninja's transformations had stabilized, not through chaos dampening or evolution control, but through something simpler: connection. In Sonic, it had found a partner who didn't need to own it, didn't need to direct it, didn't need anything except its presence. And in that freedom, Greninja had found itself again. I remember now, Greninja said as they ran, not just the faces, the feeling, what it meant to be known. Sonic grinned. Told you, partnership isn't about control, it's about choice. They reached the Master Emerald Chamber together, finding Knuckles and Mew holding the line against Eggman's elite units. Behind them, the Master Emerald pulsed with light that seemed to reach toward something, not outward, but inward, toward a connection none of them could perceive. It's happening again, Mew warned. The void between is reaching through. It's using the battle, the chaos, the emotion. The chamber shook. The walls cracked, and through the fractures they saw it, not darkness, but the absence of light, not emptiness, but the hunger that preceded existence. The void between had found them. Freedom cannot be captured. The thing that came through the cracks was not a creature. It was not a force, not an energy, not anything that could be named or understood. It was simply absence, the space where something should have been but wasn't, the silence between heartbeats, the darkness that exists before the first light. The Pokémon felt it first. Their evolution acceleration stopped instantly, not slowing but ceasing, as if time itself had frozen. Their forms stabilized, but not into comfort, into suspension, caught between what they were and what they were becoming, unable to move in either direction. The trainers felt it next. The bonds they shared with their Pokémon, connections that had survived worlds, chaos, and the collapse of reality, suddenly felt thin, distant, like echoes of something that might have been real once, but wasn't anymore. And the heroes felt it last because they were the ones who had to act. What is that? Sonic demanded, watching as the absence spread across the chamber walls, consuming light, sound, warmth. The end. Mew's voice was barely a whisper. The beginning. The space between. In my world, we tell stories of a time before time when nothing existed except potential. That is what's coming through. Potential without form. Possibility without actuality. And it is hungry. Eggman's voice crackled through the speakers, stripped of its usual arrogance. My readings? They're showing nothing, literally nothing. There's a hole in reality where that thing is. How do you fight nothing? You don't. Shadow stepped forward, chaos energy gathering around him despite the absence. You fill it. He moved before anyone could stop him, chaos controlling directly toward the void, not to attack, but to offer. His chaos energy poured into the absence, filling it with something, anything, a presence to replace the emptiness. For a moment, it worked. The void spread, slowed, then stopped. Shadow's energy blazed against the darkness, illuminating shapes that might have been possibilities, might have been futures, might have been the dreams of things not yet born. Then the void consumed. Shadow screamed, a sound none of them had ever heard from him, a sound of self being unmade, of identity dissolving into nothing. His chaos energy didn't just vanish, it was absorbed, becoming part of the absence, fueling its growth instead of stopping it. Shadow! Sonic started forward, but Greninja held him back. You can't fight it with chaos. It is chaos. The original chaos, before there was form or meaning. Any energy you give it just makes it stronger. Then what do we do? Sonic's voice cracked with desperation. We can't just let it take him. From the corner of the chamber, a new voice spoke. You let it take me instead. They turned to find Ash standing at the chamber's entrance, Pikachu at his side, his face set in an expression none of them had seen before. Not fear, not determination, but acceptance. Ash, no, Sonic began. I'm not a fighter, not like you. Ash walked toward the void, each step bringing him closer to the absence that had already consumed one of their own. But I understand something you don't. The void isn't hungry for power. It's hungry for connection, for the bonds that make existence meaningful. That's why it targeted Shadow first. His isolation made him vulnerable. He reached the edge of the darkness and stopped, looking back at Pikachu. Stay here. Pikachu's cheeks sparked, its eyes blazed with refusal. And before anyone could stop it, it ran past Ash, into the void, into the nothing, into the space between. Pikachu! Ash followed without hesitation, and for one terrible moment, both of them were gone, swallowed by absence, erased from existence, lost to the hunger that had waited since before time began. Then the void screamed, not in triumph, in pain. Light exploded from within, not chaos light, not evolution light, but something older and more fundamental. The light of connection, the light of choice, the light of two beings who had found each other across worlds and refused to let go. Ash and Pikachu emerged from the darkness, carrying Shadow between them. The void recoiled, contracting, shrinking, fleeing from something it couldn't consume, couldn't understand, couldn't even touch. What? Shadow gasped as they set him down. What did you do? Ash smiled, tears streaming down his face. We reminded it what connection feels like, and it turns out nothing is very good at handling something. The void retreated, but it didn't disappear. It pulled back to the cracks it had come through, hovering at the edges of reality, waiting, watching, learning. The battle for Angel Island continued, but something had shifted. Eggman's forces, deprived of their commander's focus. Eggman himself had fallen silent, staring at readings that made no sense, at data that showed nothing and everything at once, began to falter. The Pokémon, freed from evolution acceleration by the void's presence, or perhaps by something else, something in Ash's example that resonated through their bonds, fought with renewed purpose. And at the center of it all, Sonic stood at the edge of the void's retreat, staring into nothing. "It's still there," he said quietly. "Still waiting." "It will always be waiting," Mew confirmed. "The void is not a creature that can be defeated. It is a condition of existence, the possibility of nothing, the shadow of everything. It will wait until we give it something it can use. And we just proved it can't use connection." Sonic turned to Ash. "You showed it that. You and Pikachu." Ash shook his head. "We showed it that our connection was beyond its reach. But not every bond is as strong as ours. Not every trainer and Pokémon have what we have. If the Void finds a weak connection, a partnership built on control instead of choice, on obligation instead of love, it won't just consume them," Shadow finished, his voice still weak but steadying. "It will become them. Use their bond as a template. Learn to mimic connection without actually feeling it." The implications were terrifying. The void, learning to pretend, learning to love, learning to be. "We need to warn the others," Sonic said. "Every trainer, every Pokémon. We need to make sure they understand. Their bonds aren't just emotional, they're defensive. The stronger the connection, the safer they are." Knuckles spoke from his position near the Master Emerald. "The Emerald agrees. It's been singing a different song since Ash and Pikachu came back. A song about unity, about holding together." He touched its surface, and for a moment, everyone in the chamber felt it. A warmth that spread through them, connecting them not just to each other, but to everything. The island, the world, the Pokémon, the chaos, the evolution. All of it woven together into a single, impossible whole. This is what it wants, Knuckles realized. The Master Emerald doesn't just record history, it records potential. All the ways things could be, all the connections that could form, all the bonds that could exist. And right now, it's showing us something. The vision came to all of them at once, a world where chaos and evolution coexisted, where speed and growth complemented each other, where freedom and bond were not opposites, but partners. A world where Pokemon ran beside hedgehogs, where trainers learned from speedsters, where the void between had no purchase because everything was connected. "It's possible," Ash breathed. "It's actually possible." "It's possible," Mew agreed, "if we choose it. If every trainer, every Pokemon, every being in both worlds makes the same choice Ash made. The choice to hold on. The choice to be together, not just near together." Sonic looked at Greninja, who nodded. He looked at Shadow, who slowly, painfully nodded too. He looked at Tails, at Knuckles, at the Pokémon who had fought beside them, at the trainers who had risked everything for creatures from another world. "So what are we waiting for?" He grinned that familiar grin. "Let's go make some connections." The weeks that followed were the strangest of their lives. Trainers and Pokémon spread across Sonic's world, not as refugees, but as explorers. They learned the land, the chaos, the rhythm of a world that moved faster than any they'd known. And in return, they taught the inhabitants of that world about patience, about growth, about the slow magic of becoming. Sonic learned to slow down. Not all the time, he was still Sonic, still speed incarnate, still the fastest thing alive. But he learned that some things couldn't be rushed. Bonds, for instance. Trust. The slow, steady work of building something that would last. He spent time with Ash and Pikachu, watching them communicate without words, understanding how two beings could be so separate and so connected at once. He spent time with Greninja, learning the art of patience, of waiting, of being still enough to feel. You're getting better at this, Greninja observed one evening as they sat on a cliff overlooking the ocean. Don't tell anyone. Sonic stretched, pretending to be bored but actually content. I have a reputation to maintain. Greninja almost smiled. Your secret is safe. Below them, the ocean glittered with chaos energy and starlight. The portals still hung in the sky, but they'd stabilized, no longer growing, no longer threatening. Just there. Doors between worlds that might one day close or might remain open forever. What happens now? Sonic asked. When all this is over, when the void is dealt with and the worlds find their balance? Greninja considered. In my world, we have a saying, nothing ends, everything evolves. I think that's true here too. This isn't an ending, it's a beginning, a new form of something old. Sonic nodded slowly. Evolution through connection. That's what this has been about all along, hasn't it? Not just the Pokémon evolving, but all of us. Learning to be more than we were by being with each other. Yes, Greninja looked at him, and for the first time its eyes held something that might have been hope. That's exactly what it's been about. On Angel Island, Knuckles stood before the Master Emerald, watching as its cracks slowly healed. The process was slow, far slower than the damage had been, but it was happening. The Emerald was choosing to heal, choosing to incorporate what it had learned rather than rejecting it. You're different now, Knuckles said to it. We all are. The Emerald pulsed in response, not with words, but with feeling, gratitude, recognition, love. Knuckles placed his hand on its surface and felt, for the first time, not just his connection to the island, but his connection to everything. The trainers below, the Pokémon, the hedgehogs who ran, and the foxes who built, and the echidnas who guarded. All of them woven together into something new. This is what my ancestors guarded, he whispered. Not just power, possibility. Behind him, Mew floated silently, watching with ancient eyes. Will you be okay, Guardian? With all this change? Knuckles thought about it. Thought about the island he'd protected for so long, the solitude he'd accepted as his fate, the weight of duty he'd carried alone. I think, he said slowly, that I'll be more than okay. I think I'll be connected. Mew smiled, a rare expression for a being so old. That's all any of us can hope for. Shadow stood on the Ark's observation deck, looking down at the world below. He'd come here to think, to process, to understand what had happened to him in the void. He'd been consumed, literally erased, and then pulled back by a bond that wasn't even his. Ash and Pikachu had risked everything for him. A stranger, a rival, a being who'd spent most of his existence alone. Why? You're thinking too hard. He turned to find Rouge the Bat leaning in the doorway, her usual smirk softened by something that might have been concern. Rouge, what are you doing here? Checking on a friend. She walked toward him, her heels clicking against the deck. You've been up here for 3 days. We were starting to worry. Shadow almost smiled. I don't have friends. You do now. Rouge stood beside him, looking out at the world. That's what happens when you let people pull you out of voids. They tend to get attached. Shadow was silent for a long moment. Then, I didn't understand it at first. Why they came for me. Why they risked themselves. I've spent my entire existence believing that connection was weakness. That depending on others meant failing to be strong enough alone. And now? He thought about Ash's face as he'd walked into the void. Pikachu's refusal to stay behind, the way their bond had blazed against the darkness like a star. Now I think I was wrong. Rouge nodded, accepting this without comment. So what do we do now? With all this connection? Shadow looked out at the portals, at the world below, at the future stretching before them like an endless horizon. We learn, he said. We grow. We become more than we were. He turned to her, and for the first time in his existence, Shadow the Hedgehog smiled. Together. In the mountains where it had all begun, Moltres spread its wings and sang. The song carried across the world, heard by every legendary, every Pokémon, every being attuned to the forces that shaped existence. It was a song of acknowledgement, of a world that had welcomed them, of chaos that had challenged them, of bonds that had saved them. One by one, the other legendaries responded. Entei's roar, Suicune's call, Raiku's thunder, Ho-Oh's cry, Groudon's rumble, Kyogre's song. They were not retreating. They were not surrendering. They were adapting, learning to exist in a world that moved faster than any they'd known, learning to find balance in chaos, learning to be part of something larger than themselves. And somewhere in the space between, the void between watched and waited and learned. It had tasted connection now. It understood what it was, what it meant, why it mattered. And in its ancient, patient way, it began to wonder. What would it feel like to have a bond of its own? The speed of growth. The day the void returned, the sky turned silver. Not gold, not gray, silver. The color of moonlight on water, of reflections in mirrors, of the space between waking and dreaming. It spread from the portals outward, slow at first, then faster, until the entire sky was one vast, shimmering expanse of impossible light. Below, the world held its breath. They're not attacking, Tails observed, studying readings that made no sense. The energy signatures are completely stable. If anything, they're more stable than before. It's like the void is integrating. Sonic stood beside him, Greninja at his side, Ash and Pikachu nearby. Weeks of preparation, of building connections, of strengthening bonds, all of it leading to this moment. Or learning, Shadow said quietly. We showed it what connection feels like. Maybe it's trying to understand. Can the void understand? Ash asked. It's nothing. Absence. How can nothing learn? Mew appeared beside them, floating gently. Nothing can learn everything, given enough time. And the void has had all the time there is. It was here before the first world formed, before the first light shone, before the first thought sparked into being. If it has finally found something worth understanding, it'll want more, Sonic finished. It'll want to be more. The silver sky pulsed, not with threat, but with curiosity. And from the largest portal, something began to emerge. It took no form they could recognize. It shifted constantly, flowing through shapes and colors and textures, never settling, never still. For a moment, it looked like Mew, then like Pikachu, then like Sonic, then like Shadow. Then it became all of them at once, a composite of everything it had observed, everything it had learned. You showed me connection, it said, and its voice was all voices, none voices, the echo of existence in an empty room. I did not understand at first. I am absence. I am the space between. Connection requires presence, requires being. How could I, who am not, ever be? The being, the void's avatar, its attempt at form, drifted closer, its multiple eyes tracking each of them separately. But you also showed me that connection is not a thing. It is a process, a constant becoming, a reaching toward. And I can reach. I have always reached. I just did not know what I was reaching for. Sonic stepped forward. What do you want? To understand. The avatar's voice softened, became almost plaintive. To feel what you feel. To be what you are. To connect. Ash looked at Pikachu, then at the avatar, then at his friends. Connection isn't something you can take. It's something you build, something you earn, something you choose. I have no choice, the avatar said. I am all choices, all possibilities, all potentials. I am the space in which choices are made. How can I choose when I'm everything that choice could be? The question hung in the silver air, unanswerable and inevitable. Then Greninja spoke. You choose by not being everything. The avatar turned its many eyes on the transformed Pokémon. Explain. In my world, I was a protector, a guardian. I stayed behind when others moved on, watching, waiting, being what was needed. But in doing so, I lost myself, became nothing but duty, nothing but purpose. I was everything my role required and nothing that I required. It stepped forward, meeting the avatar's impossible gaze. To find myself again, I had to let go. To stop being everything and start being something, something small, something specific, something that could connect. The avatar was silent for a long moment. Then, you are suggesting I limit myself. Choose one form, one existence, one connection. I'm suggesting that to have a connection, you need to be someone who can connect, and you can't be someone if you're everyone. The silver sky flickered. The avatar's forms wavered, destabilized, nearly dissolved. Then, slowly, carefully, it began to choose. The process took hours. The avatar cycled through forms. Thousands, millions, more than any of them could count. Each one was rejected, set aside, considered, and found wanting. It tried being Mew, but found ancient loneliness. It tried being Pikachu, but found devotion too intense. It tried being Sonic, but found speed too isolating. It tried being Shadow, but found pain too deep. And then, finally, it tried being small. The form that emerged was barely a foot tall, a tiny creature of silver light, with large eyes and a tail that sparkled like stars. It looked around at the world with wonder, with fear, with hope. This, it said, and its voice was no longer all voices, but one voice. Small, uncertain, achingly young. This feels right. This feels like me. Mew floated closer, studying the tiny being. Do you have a name? The creature thought about it. I was the void. I was nothing. I was everything. Now. It looked at its small hands, its small body, its small existence. Now I am here. Is that enough? Is here a name? Mew smiled, that ancient, knowing smile. Here is the best name there is. It means you've arrived. It means you're present. It means you're ready to begin. The tiny creature, here, looked at the beings around it, at the world below, at the silver sky that was slowly fading back to blue. What happens now? It asked. Now that I'm here? Sonic crouched down, meeting its eyes at its own level. Now you live, you grow, you connect. You make mistakes and learn from them. You find people who matter and matter to them. You become more than you were one day at a time. Here, consider this. That sounds hard. It is, Sonic grinned. It's also the best thing there is. The silver sky faded. The portals stabilized, then began to close, not slamming shut, but receding, pulling back toward the worlds they'd connected. Through them, Pokémon began to return home, carrying with them memories of chaos and connection, of speed and growth, of a world that had taught them what it meant to evolve. But not all of them left. Greninja stood at the edge of a closing portal, looking through at the world it had left behind. Ash stood beside it, Pikachu in his arms. You could go back, Ash said quietly. Your world needs you. Greninja shook its head. My world has other protectors, other guardians, other beings willing to watch and wait. It looked at Sonic, waiting in the distance, giving them space. Here, I found something I didn't know I was missing. A partner who doesn't need me to be anything except myself. Ash nodded slowly. You're not staying for duty. You're staying for choice. Yes. Greninja looked at him, and its eyes were warm. Just as you chose Pikachu. Just as Pikachu chose you. Connection isn't obligation. It's recognition. Seeing someone and saying, you matter. You are. The portal closed behind them, and Greninja didn't look back. On Angel Island, the Master Emerald pulsed one final time, a wave of energy that spread across both worlds, touching every being, every bond, every connection. It wasn't a command, it wasn't a warning, it was simply acknowledgement. You are here, it said. You matter. You are part of something larger than yourselves. Knuckles felt it like a hand on his shoulder, like his ancestors' approval, like the island itself saying thank you. He placed his palm on the emerald's surface and felt its warmth, its age, its infinite patience. Guardian, Mew said, floating beside him, the emerald has chosen to remember. Everything that happened here, every bond formed, every choice made, every connection strengthened, it's all recorded now, part of this world's history, part of you. Knuckles nodded. What happens to the Pokémon who stayed? The ones who chose to make this world their home? They become part of it, just as chaos energy has become part of them. The two worlds will never be separate again, not truly. There will always be echoes, always connections, always the possibility of return. Mew looked out at the world below, at the trainers saying goodbye to new friends, at the Pokémon finding places to belong, at the hedgehogs and foxes and echidnas who had become something more than they were. This is not an ending, Mew said. This is a beginning, the first page of a story that will be told for generations. Knuckles smiled, rare for him, but genuine. What's the story called? Mew considered. I think The Speed of Growth. A tale of two worlds that learned to move together. In the mountains, here sat alone, watching the stars. Its small body was tired in ways it had never been before, in ways that absence could never feel. But the tiredness was good. It meant it had done something. It meant it had been. You okay? Here looked up to find Sonic approaching, moving slowly. An effort, but one he'd learned to make. I don't know, Here admitted. I've never been anything before. I don't know what okay feels like. Sonic sat beside it, looking out at the same stars. Okay feels like this. Sitting with someone, not needing to talk, just being. Here considered this. This is okay? This is okay. They sat in silence for a long moment. Then, Sonic, yeah? Thank you for showing me that nothing can become something. That absence can learn to be present. Sonic looked at the tiny creature beside him, at the vast potential it had given up to become small and specific and real. Thank you, he said, for choosing to try. That took more courage than anything I've ever done. Here smiled. Its first real smile, its first expression of genuine joy. Then we're even. Partners? Here thought about it. Thought about what partnership meant, what connection required, what it would cost to care about someone who might leave, might change, might stop being. Yes, it said finally, partners. And in that moment, the void between became something it had never been before. Part of rather than apart from, connected rather than absent, here rather than nowhere. The stars seemed to shine brighter. A world that learned to slow down. The last portal closed at sunset. It happened quietly, no fanfare, no drama, just a gradual fading of light until the sky was simply sky again, blue and gold and familiar. On both sides of the divide, beings who had crossed between worlds felt the connection thin, become memory, become history. On Sonic's world, the Pokémon who had chosen to stay gathered in places that had become home. The fire types found warmth in volcanic regions. The water types claimed coasts and rivers. The grass types rooted themselves in forests that welcomed their presence. And everywhere, the chaos energy that permeated everything hummed with new frequencies. Frequencies tuned to evolution, to growth, to the slow magic of becoming. In Tails' workshop, the young inventor sat surrounded by data that would take years to fully analyze. Beside him, Here watched with curious eyes, learning what it meant to be curious, to wonder, to not know and want to find out. The energy patterns are stabilizing. Tails reported to no one in particular. The chaos fields are incorporating Pokémon biology as a permanent variable. Evolution is slowing to sustainable rates. Fast by your world's standards, but not dangerous. The system is finding balance. Here tilted its head. System? Everything. The world, the chaos, the Pokémon. Us. Tails gestured vaguely. All of it working together, finding equilibrium. It's beautiful, really. Beautiful. Here tested the word. I think I understand. It means right. It means as things should be. Tails smiled. Yep, exactly that. On Angel Island, Knuckles stood before the Master Emerald, watching as its surface slowly transformed. The cracks had healed, but they'd left traces, patterns that hadn't been there before, lines that told stories, shapes that meant something. The emerald wasn't just a record anymore. It was a living thing, growing and changing just like everything else. It's different now, he said to the empty chamber. We're all different. From behind him, a voice. Is that bad? He turned to find a small Pokémon, an Eevee, the same one that had been with the girl in Eggman's laboratory, sitting in the chamber entrance, watching him with curious eyes. You followed me up here? The Eevee nodded. You seemed like you needed company. Knuckles almost laughed. I've been alone for most of my life. I don't need company. That's not true. The Eevee walked toward him, each step careful, deliberate. You just got used to being alone. That's different from not needing anyone. Knuckles looked at the small creature, at its earnest eyes and determined stance. Why do you care? Because you saved me. In the laboratory. You and the others. You didn't have to. I was nothing to you. A stranger from another world. But you fought for me anyway. The Eevee sat beside him, looking up at the Master Emerald. In my world, we have a saying, save one life and you're connected forever. I think that's true here, too. Knuckles was silent for a long moment. Then, slowly, he sat down beside the Eevee. What's your name? Eevee? No, I mean... He paused. Never mind. Eevee works. The Eevee leaned against him, warm and solid and present. Eevee works fine. They sat together, Guardian and Pokémon, watching the emerald pulse with new light. In Station Square, life had returned to normal, or as normal as it could be, given everything. Trainers who had chosen to stay found homes among the humans who inhabited this world. Some opened Pokémon centers, adapting their world's knowledge to local needs. Others explored, mapping the chaos rich environment, documenting the ways their partners adapted and grew. Ash and Pikachu had become something like ambassadors, traveling between communities, strengthening connections, reminding everyone what they'd learned. They visited Tails' workshop regularly, comparing notes, sharing stories, building a bridge between worlds that would never fully close. You could go home, Sonic said one evening as they sat on a hill overlooking the city. The portals aren't completely gone. There are still ways through if you know where to look. Ash nodded. I know, but home isn't a place anymore. It's this. He gestured at Pikachu, at Sonic, at the world below. It's the people and Pokemon I'm with. It's the connections we've built. Pikachu squeaked in agreement, nuzzling against Ash's hand. Sonic smiled. You know, when this all started, I thought you guys were crazy. Fighting beside creatures who could leave any time. Building bonds that could be broken. It seemed like too much risk for too little reward. And now? Now I get it. Sonic looked out at the sunset, at the world that had changed so much in so little time. Risk is the point. Choosing to connect even though it might hurt. That's what makes it meaningful. That's what makes it real. Ash nodded. That's what we've been trying to teach all along. Evolution isn't just about getting stronger. It's about becoming more connected, more willing to risk, more open to change. Speed's the same way. Sonic stretched, feeling the familiar need to move, to run, to be. It's not just about going fast, it's about choosing direction, choosing where to go and who to go with. Speed without connection is just running in circles. They sat in companionable silence, watching the stars emerge. So what now? Ash asked eventually. Sonic thought about it. Now we live, we grow, we keep learning from each other. We face whatever comes next, together. He stood, offering Ash a hand. Speaking of which, Greninja and I found something interesting in the mountains yesterday. Some kind of ancient ruin with energy signatures that don't match anything we've seen. Want to check it out? Ash grinned, taking his hand. Wouldn't miss it. They ran toward the mountains, Pikachu sparking with excitement. Two beings from different worlds who had found in each other something neither had expected. A friend who understood. In Eggman's laboratory, the scientist sat surrounded by shattered machines and broken dreams. His invasion had failed. His weapons had been useless. His grand plan to control chaos and evolution had crumbled into dust. And yet, fascinating, he murmured, studying readings from the void's brief emergence. Absolutely fascinating. The data showed patterns he'd never seen before. Energy signatures that shouldn't exist, interactions that defied known physics, possibilities that opened like doors into infinite futures. Father always said I was too focused on control, too obsessed with domination. Eggman stroked his mustache thoughtfully. Perhaps for once he was right. He looked at the readings again, at the connections they revealed, at the bonds that had saved a world. Perhaps it's time to try something new. The final scene took place on a hill overlooking Green Hill Zone, where it had all begun. Sonic stood alone, or almost alone. Beside him, Greninja watched the sunset with ancient eyes, its form stable now, its connection deep and true. It's strange, Sonic said. A few months ago, I couldn't imagine standing still this long. Now it feels right. Greninja nodded. Growth requires stillness. Speed requires patience. They're not opposites, they're partners, just like us. Sonic smiled. Yeah, just like us. Below them, the world hummed with new energy, chaos and evolution intertwined, freedom and connection dancing together. Pokemon moved through forests that had learned to welcome them. Trainers walked beside partners who had chosen to stay. Hedgehogs ran and foxes built and echidnas guarded, and everything somehow worked. What do you think happens next? Sonic asked. Greninja considered. More of this, I hope. More learning, more growing, more connections. It paused. And probably more chaos. There's always more chaos. Sonic laughed, a bright, free sound that carried across the hills. Wouldn't have it any other way. They stood together, speed and shadow, freedom and bond, two beings who had found in each other something neither had expected. A mirror, a reminder, a friend. And somewhere in the distance, a Pokemon egg hummed with chaos energy, waiting to hatch, waiting to begin, waiting to become part of a story that would never truly end. In the space between worlds, here watched the sunset through eyes that were learning to see. It had been days since it chose form, since it became small and specific and real. Each moment brought new discoveries. The warmth of sunlight, the comfort of presence, the strange ache of missing someone who wasn't there. Learning to feel, it whispered to itself. Learning to be. Tails had given it a room in his workshop, a place to sleep and think and grow. Here spent hours there, watching the young inventor work, absorbing knowledge like a sponge absorbs water. It was learning about chaos energy, about evolution, about the bonds that made existence meaningful. And it was learning about itself. I am here, it said one night, looking at its reflection in a polished metal surface. I am small. I am learning. I am becoming. The reflection smiled back at it. A real smile, a genuine expression of something that felt like joy. Hello here, it said to itself. Nice to meet you. On Angel Island, the Master Emerald pulsed with new light. Not warning, not danger, just presence. The patterns on its surface shifted, telling stories that would take generations to read. Knuckles stood before it, Eevee at his side, feeling the weight of centuries and the lightness of now. What do you see? Eevee asked. Knuckles looked at the patterns, at the connections they represented, at the future they promised. Everything, he said, and nothing, and everything in between. Eevee nodded as if this made perfect sense. That's what connection feels like. Yeah. Knuckles placed his hand on the emerald's surface, feeling its warmth, its age, its infinite patience. Yeah, it is. In Station Square, Ash and Pikachu walked through streets that had become familiar, past humans who had become friends, toward a future that stretched before them like an open road. You know, Ash said, I used to think home was a place. Pallet Town, my mom's house, the routes I traveled. Pikachu looked up at him, questioning. Now I think home is this. Ash gestured at everything and nothing. Being with you, being with our friends, being part of something larger than myself. Pikachu squeaked happily, and Ash felt that familiar warmth. The bond that had carried them through worlds, through chaos, through evolution and change and everything in between. Partners? He asked. Pikachu's answer was immediate and absolute. A spark of electricity, a nuzzle against his cheek, a lifetime of trust compressed into a single perfect moment. Partners, Ash agreed, always. Sonic watched them from a distance, Greninja beside him. There's something special, he said. Those two. Greninja nodded. They remind me of us. Sonic thought about it, about the weeks they'd spent together, the battles they'd fought, the silences they'd shared. Yeah, I guess they do. He looked at Greninja, at the transformed Pokémon who had chosen this world, this life, this connection. Thank you, he said, for staying, for choosing us. Greninja's eyes softened. Thank you for being worth choosing. They stood together, watching the sunset paint the sky in colors that had never existed before. Chaos colors, evolution colors, the colors of two worlds learning to be one. And somewhere in the distance, a Pokemon egg hummed with possibility, waiting for its moment, waiting for its story to begin. In the workshop, Here looked up from its studies as a soft glow filled the room. The egg, the one that had been found in the mountains, humming with chaos energy, was hatching. Here watched as the shell cracked and light poured out, as a new being emerged into a world that was ready to welcome it. The creature that emerged was small and silver, with large eyes and a tail that sparkled like stars. Hello, Here whispered. Welcome to being. The creature looked at Here, at the world around it, at the infinite possibilities stretching before it, and then, in a voice that was barely a whisper, it spoke its first word. Here. Here smiled, a real smile, full of joy and wonder and the strange ache of recognition. Yes, it said, we're both here now. And in that moment, the void between became something new, a beginning, a promise, a family. The sun set on a world that had learned to slow down, not to stop, never to stop. Speed was still valued, still celebrated, still essential to who they were. But now there was room for something else, too. Patience, connection, the slow, steady work of becoming. Pokemon ran beside hedgehogs through Green Hill Zone. Trainers walked with foxes through Emerald Coast. Guardians sat with Eevees on Angel Island, watching stars that had never seemed so bright. And everywhere the chaos energy hummed with new frequencies, frequencies tuned to evolution, to growth, to the bonds that made existence meaningful. In one world, power was trained. In the other, it was unleashed. But now they knew the truth. Chaos moved fast, evolution moved forward, and freedom and bond were never enemies, only unfamiliar. Now they were familiar. Now they were home, in memory of every bond that crossed between worlds, in honor of every choice that made connection possible, in hope of every beginning yet to come. What if Pokemon entered the Sonic universe? Chaos energy versus evolution. A story of speed and growth, freedom and bond, and two worlds that learned to move together. In a laboratory somewhere between worlds, a machine hummed with unfamiliar energy. Dr. Eggman stood before it, stroking his mustache with satisfaction. The readings were perfect, better than perfect. The data from the void's emergence had yielded insights he'd never imagined, possibilities he'd never dreamed. Phase 1 complete, he murmured. Phase 2 begins. On a screen beside him, an image formed, a creature of shadow and light, of chaos and evolution combined. It had no name yet, but it would, soon. Father always said I couldn't create anything lasting, Eggman mused. He was wrong. I just needed the right materials. The creature in the image opened its eyes that held the void and the stars, the nothing and the everything, the potential of two worlds merged into one. Soon, Eggman promised. Soon we'll show them what true connection looks like. The machine hummed louder. The creature watched. And somewhere in the distance, Here felt a shiver of something it couldn't name. A warning, perhaps, or a premonition. The story wasn't over. It was only beginning.